Hello, everyone. I am Kevin Gallagher, and welcome to another installment of the Aces Jiu-Jitsu interview series, blog post, podcast, whatever we're calling it these days. But it's a new thing I've been doing for Aces Jiu-Jitsu to help them guys. I give them a little content, and I get to interview some really cool people. So today, I have someone that I know very personally and very dearly. I know I say that about all the people I talk to because I want to sound like a big shot, but I actually know Robbie Donofrio personally. We've been good friends. He's been a coach, mentor figure to me, and a friend to me for quite some time. And he's also a very accomplished jiu-jitsu practitioner. What year was it? 2016. You won the ADCC trials, I think it was. 2014.
No, I won in 2012.
2012 ADCC trial
ADCC
champion
2013, I was in China.
in China, right? He
Yeah.
is we'll call it a second degree black belt. He got your black belt in 2016, 14, right?
14.
Yes, 14. We've been a black belt for 6 years, and we do that weird Hoist Gracie promotion thing where we get our white stripe and then we go for it. We're usually a year or stripe behind the rest of the jiu-jitsu world. But Robbie Donofrio is an amazing jiu-jitsu mind and someone I'm pleased to have on to just rap with it for a little bit. So, Robbie, how you doing today, brother?
Doing good, man.
Yeah.
Cool classes this morning. I've been swamped with private lessons lately. So, been doing that all day. Today's my birthday, too.
Happy birthday, brother.
So, my wife won't let me in the house right now. I don't know what's going on.
That's
so
good.
I'm here at my gym just chilling by myself.
I will reap the benefits if you have an extra hour in the afternoon.
I got extra time. I mean, be my fourth kid coming soon.
So let's just get into it. Let's talk a little bit about you, about how you started doing jiu-jitsu, you know, where you were in life and some of the things you've accomplished. Because I know you got your own gym and some of the things you put into that. So,
Well, if you want to know the story behind how I started jiu-jitsu, when I was in the Air Force back in 2003, 2004, I met a girl, started dating a girl who was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. And I didn't know what UFC was. I didn't know anything about this world. And I used to lift weights a lot. So I was jacked, and I thought I could fight one of those guys. And she used to just throw me into chokes and control me in a way that I had never seen before. And
sounds like love, but that's, we'll get to that later. That's horrible.
I remember being just totally emasculated. Is that the word?
That's a good one. We'll work with that.
Yeah, just like what? And I became obsessed. That's when I started watching the old UFCs and got obsessed. And then, obviously Hoist Gracie. And then right when I got out of the Air Force, I moved to Tampa. And first thing I did was Google jiu-jitsu or MMA Tampa. And because I actually wanted to, was thinking about MMA more than anything. And, so I found Rob Kahn. Luckily, I found Rob Kahn because I don't know that I would have stuck with it if it wasn't with a guy like him. Because, I look at some of these professors out there that are like, full of themselves in a lot of ways. And I always thought Rob and I would joke around with each other a lot and talk shit. And I thought that was funny. But, started with Rob. And, when I was a white belt, Rob came up to me and was like, "You're going to make it to ADCC." I was like, "Really?" And I stuck with it, trained my ass off, lived in my car, lived inside the gym, trained all day, every day, truly from 4 a.m. to I was at the gym till 10 p.m., whether it be teaching classes, private lessons, or just training. And, I fought one MMA fight back in 2010, which was fun. I won by heel hook. I'm probably one of the only people to win their first MMA fight by heel hook. It was funny. Leg locks, or something I stumbled upon young in my jiu-jitsu. I was a white belt doing leg locks. It just felt right to me, but nobody else was doing them. And there wasn't a guide to leg locking back then. But I used to do, a regular single leg ashi or single leg X, heel hook, and then roll into a knee bar. Or if you tried to step around my guard, I would go honey hole. I didn't even know what that was. But I used to just jump into it and get heel hooks. But anyway, 20 2012, I went up to, what was it? Columbus, Ohio. It was one of those, I think it was like the Arnold something with Arnold. It was like a big convention.
Arnold Classic, I think they call
Arnold Classic, maybe.
Right.
It was a huge convention, and they held the trials there that year. And won 4 matches, made it, got first place. I went up with Matt that year.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And
Matt Arroyo.
Matt Arroyo, yeah. I went up with Matt Arroyo, and he didn't have the same luck that day, but, you know, he obviously made it a couple of years later.
Right.
You know, what a beast that dude is.
Ah, bro, man. Rolling with Matt is just
Yeah.
He's one of them guys that when you roll with him, you're never going to get a, hey, let's just have some fun here today. Every roll you have with Matt is a battle for the death.
He's the closest thing to a robot I've ever known. Like a machine, you know?
It's so true. It's so true.
It's like, is that guy ever not in shape? Like, ever?
No, it's insane. He could literally he'll talk about this a lot. Like, he could literally take 6 months off from training. Yeah. Never not step on the mat and then go right into it and be just this athletic specimen that he is. And when you roll with him, like even on the rare occasions, you know, he's my coach and there's some parts of him that kind of like big brother me just because he has that feeling over me. But even on the occasions when I roll with him where I'm like, oh, I caught this dude. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, this is like I got him. I beat him in this position, which is very rare just because he knows my game very well. Yeah. Like he still has that ridiculous next level athleticism where he can just go, oh, that was cute, Kevin, but check this out. I'm gonna pick you up in the air and do a back somersault and then turn back on my feet and end up in mount on you.
Yeah, for sure. My hardest roll between him and Martinez, are for sure my hardest, the toughest rolls I have.
Yeah, Martinez is an animal to roll with. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some of your early influences because I know you as a grappler because I've studied underneath you and I consider you one of the influencing factors on my jiu-jitsu game from coming up to me becoming a black belt. Tell us a little bit about some of the influence you have on your game, and particularly the early influences of Marcelo Garcia, which is a name we just don't talk a whole lot about anymore, which is kind of sad. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that is sad because, you know, he took the game to a new level. For sure, the game was at a certain level, and Marcelo Garcia, in my opinion, made the open guard, the seated guard, something to be scared of, and something, you know, I got a lot of my open guard stuff from Marcelo. I mean, the Marcelo armbar, you know that armbar, right? Mm-hmm. I've turned it into something that people call the Robbie D armbar at this point, where I use it as a half guard overhook series. But basically, Marcelo Garcia was the one who made that armbar popular, you know, not to mention Marcelo was the first one to do the harness. I mean the whatever you want to call it, the seatbelt.
It's really true. People don't realize what an innovator Marcelo Garcia was. Everybody used to do the double underhooks. Is that was the key thing? Right.
And double underhooks has its place, but you know, Marcelo changed the game with that. Yeah. I mean, he made the rear naked choke something, you know, to be scared of. But you know, my influences were probably mostly Marcelo. I mean, and then Rob Kahn. You know, back when I started, there wasn't really that much YouTube. I mean, YouTube existed, but it wasn't what it was now. I mean, you only had limited videos to watch of people. And, you know, Marcelo is one that I watched probably more than anybody. Robert Drysdale was a big influence. I do a lot of his half guard stuff, even to this day. But like, I didn't even have a leg locker to look up to.
Right.
I was doing leg locks, but truly really had no guidance there at all. I had to kind of like figure a lot of stuff out. I took the principles always that Rob taught me, and I always applied those principles to everything I did. So, you know, I feel like because of that, I was able to figure out a lot of my own jiu-jitsu. You know, I did a lot of stuff Marcelo did, but I have my own twist on it now at this point. But the foot sweeps from Marcelo, you know, Marcelo used to do the dummy sweep. That is a huge part of my game. I started doing strictly because of him. But Cyborg was another influence coming up, because back in the day, we would go, like when I was a blue belt, now I'm probably purple belt. You know, Matt and I were always either Matt was winning the Copa Absolute or I was winning the Copa Absolute, or we were in the finals with some beast, you know. So like these absolute divisions were Pablo Popovich, Buchecha. Buchecha started down here in Tampa.
Right. I remember
Popovich, Buchecha, Cyborg, and whatever other giant Brazilian beast that they had with them. They called them the Avengers back then. And, you could watch on YouTube. I have a match with Popovich on YouTube where he choked me from mount. He rape choked me from mount. And, I learned a lot in those days because we had a lot of high-level guys to compete with at these low-level tournaments because there wasn't really that many other tournaments to go to. So you had the best in the world competing in local grappling tournaments all the time.
At a high school down the street, right?
Yeah. And it was intense. There was a guy named Daniel Marias. I don't know if you ever remember him.
Yep.
But that guy, I think I had 4 matches with. He beat me 4 times, but it was always on like an advantage or a point. But
Wagner was always up in the
Wagner
was always around. Yeah.
Wagner I had a match with as like a blue or purple belt.
Yeah, I think
Cyborg got a blue belt.
I think a lot of these new like current jiu-jitsu guys don't really realize, and I don't mean I hate to see that. Oh, I'm old, but like they don't really understand how good they have it being able to see these amazing professional jiu-jitsu performers. When we were coming up, professional jiu-jitsu, wasn't even a forethought. You had the ADCC, then you had, Grappler's Quest, which was kind of the biggest thing out there, but it was nowhere near. I mean, there was no coverage, there was no live feeds. Maybe you got lucky and saw an Instagram not Instagram, a YouTube video of a couple matches here and there. But the idea of having a real legit platform for these super high level athletes to go compete at wasn't there. We competed with them. We were on the same bracket. In some little small copa around the corner is Cyborg or Wagner and these big names. Buchecha, I remember the one that Buchecha was on. I wasn't. I was a little bit younger than you are. But if you were purple belt or higher, brown belt or higher, you were on the card competing at Cyborg.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. There was one division that I think I lost. I must have been a purple belt. And Daniel Marias at the time was the king of Copa. He won every absolute. He beat Matt a few times. He beat me. He beat some other guys. No one was able to beat him, but he was like a point guy. Right. He was like take you down, hold you there, pass your guard, hold you there. That time, it never really submitted any of us, but he was the winner, man. He was the best at the time. And all of a sudden, there's this new Brazilian with the Avengers, and he's really tall and he's jacked. And they called him Buchecha, and nobody knew who he was. And he made it to the finals, so he ran through a couple purple belts probably. And then he was in the finals with Daniel Marias, and everyone was like watching, like eyes peeled, like, oh my God. And he fucking destroyed Daniel Marias. You can watch that match on YouTube.
Oh, I'm gonna check that out.
And he takes his back, flattens him out.
Yeah.
And Marias ends up tapping just from being flattened out. Yeah. Like didn't even have to get the choke in.
Right.
It was incredible. And that's how Buchecha came on the scene.
I remember Matt always telling that story. Like everybody was in the gym at a Copa one day, and like they were all talking about who's that guy over there? That's that Buchecha, and that was right here. That was in the Tampa Bay area. Like the Central Florida area, it doesn't get as much credit, South Florida, Central Florida, as being the kind of like not birthplace, but like
there's a lot of birthplace. Yeah, I would say birthplace for a lot of these guys.
Right.
Obviously, some of these guys probably competed in Brazil as well. I would imagine before they came to America, but I don't know about those. But nobody knew who Buchecha was until that day. I'll tell you that. Yeah. That's for sure. And then everybody went through the roof, man.
Let's talk a little bit more about some of the things that Marcelo Garcia did to change the sport of jiu-jitsu. And I mean that in the same terminology of the idea of what open guard is today. Right. Because if you watch professional jiu-jitsu now in these days, everything is open guard. Mm-hmm. We don't realize it, because we didn't go through the days prior to Marcelo Garcia where everything was closed guard. Everything was all about having some static position and holding on to control, and then using this to manipulate a little bit to get a Kimura. It was a very basic, fundamental approach that was very rooted in the old school, self-defense type mechanisms that jiu-jitsu incorporated. But Marcelo Garcia came along and really opened up the game, the idea of boring matches. Marcelo really, he doesn't get the credit for that. It kind of upsets me.
Well, I think that here's how it works, man. I think before Marcelo, even after Marcelo, but especially beforehand, the guard, I think, was more of a defensive position in general. People were basically stuck on their backs. And, they weren't really playing the sit-up guard as much as they would be willing to play a half guard or lay on their back or play a closed guard. And if you look at what Marcelo did, even if wasn't necessarily purposefully, I mean, think about it this way, man. Let's say everybody understands wrestling, right? Everybody understands that in wrestling, I want inside control with my arms, right? I need to control your hips or your head, take you down to the mat, turn you over onto your back, and pin you. But what if I said, okay, now the goal in this wrestling match is not a pin. Now it's to get a submission, to make your opponent tap. And so being pinned doesn't matter. They must tap. So now the only thing that really changes is I'm able to sit down and I can do takedowns from a seated position. And I have the use of my ankles to hook you, right? And I get to accomplish the same goal of putting you on your back and submitting you, or yes, submitting you from my back, but it just is another position I get to wrestle from. And with that knowledge, you're more inclined to go from sitting to standing easier and using that to your advantage. And I think that's what changed. Marcelo Garcia gave us a glimpse of that, but in all honesty, the Danaher guys, they really put the cherry on top when it came to that style, because, if I'm sitting in guard and I push into you with the intentions on standing up, it immediately narrows your options. You either push back into me, you stand up, or you fall to your back. But you can only do one of those three things. And if I can anticipate that and counter you, meaning if I stand up before you do, I get to have a front headlock position. If you push back into me, I can elevate you and get underneath you. Bless you. So I can elevate you and get underneath you. So it's this off-balancing technique that was not utilized much before Marcelo, even after Marcelo. But, we have to give a lot of credit to the Danaher guys for really putting that into play, the off-balancing sequences. Because before that, guys weren't doing that from the guard. They were just playing guard, waiting for you to come in. Like, remember Cyborgs, like Tornado Guard, and everybody wanted to either invert underneath you or go into half guard, but nobody was offensively pushing the pace, sitting up with arm drags, head snaps, pushes to standing before Marcelo. Right. But then, no, I think Marcelo was too far ahead of his time, because he's not even appreciated for that now. Instead, I think these Danaher guys, in my opinion, took a lot of notes from Marcelo and expanded on that, and were able to incorporate leg locks. I mean, basically, they're playing like Marcelo with leg locks. If you look at like how Gordon Ryan rolls, he does the foot sweeps like Marcelo, arm drags the same way, the back positioning is all the same. But they incorporated a systemized leg lock attack with that, which makes things so much more complicated. And they ended up being, in my opinion, when, Gordon Ryan came onto the scene, like you take Gordon Ryan as a purple belt when he was a purple belt and bring him into now, like, I don't think he does as well as he did then. I think he was ahead of his time with the leg locking game, which made him able to beat opponents that were much more experienced than him. So I know I'm getting into the
No,
down.
no,
It's hard
that's
to talk
cool.
about. It's hard to talk about jiu-jitsu without those guys.
Well, it all makes sense and ties together. I'm kind of looking
Right.
at the timeline of the advancement of jiu-jitsu that
Right.
starts with Marcelo Garcia creating those options, but now guys are
Yeah.
starting to turn new techniques out of that.
Right, exactly. And the thing that's even more substantial about this is that this type of guard playing and this type of idea doesn't translate into the gi the same way. And most of the guys that were really high level back then, before Marcelo or right after him, really were good at the gi, but then they would go do that same stuff without the gi, kind of expecting the same results. So when I play gi, if I'm playing guard in the gi, me having a grip on your gi is highly important. I have to establish, this is what they say in the gi, establish your preferred grips and then start attacking. So you're playing this grip fighting game. I don't think people knew how to do that no gi.
Right.
I think they knew how to hand fight standing up, but they didn't translate that same hand fighting to when they were sitting. They just instead laid down and tried to go half guard or full guard, or
which led to a very
stagnant.
Stagnant defensive approach, like counterpunching. Like, because I can't generate any offense, I'm just waiting for you to go in for a guard pass so that I can now anticipate. Like, guys would be able to maintain their guard because, just like you said, without having the grips to hold on to, it's equally difficult for someone to pass your guard because there's nothing to hold on to. So you can weave your legs in and pummel and put the hips to fit the hips. And as you continue to progress and work harder to pass the guard, now my opportunity is for you to screw up. But that's an interesting point, the idea of pushing and pulling and actually being offensive from that guard, which is something that I'm personally trying to get a little bit better at. It's interesting you brought that up.
Yeah. So I have a system, and I call it the 7 pillars of the open guard. And I need to put it on a downloadable. I have it all filmed. And it basically takes you through each position that you should be in according to where your opponent is standing up in front of you, whether they're on their knees, whether they have one leg up, one leg forward, their head is exposed. But it takes you through all the preferred grips that you need to have, no gi. Okay, in the gi, this stuff is there already, But in no gi, nobody knows where to grip. A lot of people don't understand where to be in the open guard. Like, if you're standing over me, but I can't reach your legs, I better have a control of your head. Otherwise, I'm going to get my guard passed. Right? And then when I get control of your head, it causes you to be in a scenario where you could only do 2 things: stand up or drive into me, in which case I can snap your head down, get a guillotine. So I'm creating these grips on you with no gi, whether it be with my legs, with my arms. I'm creating these scenarios that only give you so many options. Like, if I slap hands with you, bump fists, I'm sitting down. At that moment, you got 100 things you can do to me. I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know how you're going to try to pass me. But the moment I off balance you, you're not doing anything but trying to get your balance back. In which case, I can attack you in that moment. I'm anticipating everything you do by being offensive from the open guard and willing to stand. That's the thing. You got to be willing to go from the seated guard to the standing up position seamlessly, because it's just another wrestling position. It's sort of how I see it.
Yeah, when I think about the open guard, I think about the applications of the open guard. I always think about how in the modern days of jiu-jitsu, everything is leading into that single ashi. And everything just starts to come off of that single ashi, and then everything builds from there into more advanced applications, the single X. And then obviously, if you talk about single X, you can't not talk about Marcelo Garcia. But when we start to talk about how that has morphed into the leg lock game, start to talk about how jiu-jitsu has changed over the course of that timeline to make, not just your leg lock game better, but the entirety of your offensive, approach is different.
Well, here's my thoughts on that. So you have the leg locking game, right? You got your single leg X, which transitions into the inside or the outside heel hook one way or another. When they try to escape these, we can switch the leg to the other side. And that's the leg lock game in a nutshell if I'm focused on leg locking you. Now, those same leg locking positions present you with opportunities to be in advantageous positions like side control or the back as well. So while I'm going for leg locks, it's going to provide me avenues to your back or avenues to your side. And this really changed the game because what it created was a scenario where every time I'm doing jiu-jitsu now, I'm on my way to the back. 100% of the time, I'm on my way to my opponent's back. Now, on the way there, other things might present themselves like arm bars and triangles and guillotine chokes. These are all things that I can get and finish on the way to the back. But if I miss all these submissions, my next objective is to get to your back. And I can do this playing the butterfly guard. I can do this playing sort of laying on my back guard, feet on the hips. And you can do the same thing from the top position when you're passing. Everything's on the way to the back. Every time I'm on side control, I'm doing things to get you to turn over so you give me your back. And everything else is sort of on the way there. So that's kind of how I look at it. And I think the leg lock game really made that concept stand out. I think at first people were obsessed with leg locks and they became tunnel visioned and thought that if I'm in the leg lock exchange, my options are leg locks. And that's it. And that's very far from the truth. I can take these leg locking hold positions and transition to your back. And I can be in these leg lock positions defensively and transition to your back as a counter. So the game has become very much a take the back or leg lock game. And it's funny because the close guard doesn't quite fit with that concept.
No, it doesn't.
But the close guard, if you really look at the position, if you're in my close guard, you have control of my hips right away. Right away, you can control my hips. You can stop me from moving. So the moment I open my legs is the moment you should pass me because you already have control of my hips. There's no reason to wait, right? You're halfway past my guard.
Right.
I'm starting at a disadvantage already, in my opinion, and then struggling to turn my hips while, your upper body is stopping me. It's just, yes, you can become good at the closed guard, but I feel like for me, it's more of a position I rest in. I can pause the action from there, I guess. But once my guard opens, I put my feet on the hips, I'm sitting back up. I'm back up in that sit-up guard. And if you try to push me to my back, right, I don't go to my back. I transition to half guard. So I don't lie on my back with you controlling my hips, right? And then from half guard, I can choose to either go back to butterfly, take your back, or sweep you. Not exactly sure what I was getting at, but
no, I get it.
On the way to the back is this thing I've been preaching to my students lately is the back's the golden position, especially with all the newest variations of ways to choke someone from the back. It's just having your back taken is the worst position. You can't see what's happening. They have total control over you, and they have a huge advantage. And I don't think there's a better position.
It's funny that you say that too, because we can start talking about how guys will say that the game has changed because of the new formats and leg locks and all those sort of things. But the reality of it is it's just kind of morphed into a different direction. Because if you look at old school jiu-jitsu premises of pass the guard, advanced position, eventually the top of the pyramid is always going to what? The back take. So we're still even watching today, because I watch just like you. I watch a lot of competitive jiu-jitsu. I watch it all the time. And you're 100% absolutely correct. Like 90% of the techniques anymore, the finishes anymore, are always going to be leg locks or back takes. And then one way or another, leg locks elicit a response whereupon your opponent continues to come up to take the back, or vice versa. You come up for the back take and someone squirms around, you end up getting a guard pass out of it, or you're working to a leg lock off those positions.
Right. And that's really what the no-gi game has become. But it's come so far away from the gi game.
Right.
It's so far from that now. It used to be a very similar thing, but it's truly a separate art at this point. You can't play the same type of guard in the gi. You can't. He's gonna grab your pants and fucking pass your guard. You can't grab my pants in the gi with no gi. So everything has to change. With the gi, an enormous part of it is knowing how to grip fight. It's enormous. You watch these gi matches, they're so boring because half the match everybody's trying to grip each other. And it's you trying to grip me breaking your grip and gripping you breaking my grip and gripping me. It's not all that complicated, really. I mean, it is, but that's essentially what it is. Well, in no-gi, it's me establishing a grip and you countering that with another movement that has nothing to do with my grip. So everything sort of changes in no-gi now. And I think it used to be a lot closer together than it is now, for sure.
Right.
Now, if they allow heel hooks and stuff in the gi, we might see some, like, you might see the gi go in a different direction, but I highly doubt I think it's going to go more towards judo than it will go more towards, leg locking.
Yeah,
than anything.
It's unquestionable that the incorporation of having a fear of a heel hook or any type of legitimate leg locking situation doesn't just advance your ability to win heel hooks, but it also opens up your entire strategical approach to going for other positions and working to other things that come off of that. Talk a little bit about how that has changed like the entirety of like your strategic approach to jiu-jitsu game, because it took me a while because I didn't start doing leg locks at all. I was just, okay, I'm just going to tap because I don't want to get hurt, up until I'm with brown belt. And then it became a point that like, well, wait a minute, like jiu-jitsu, I mean, leg locks are just part of the game. I can't just tap because I'm a loser if I do that. I want to get better at jiu-jitsu.
You got to learn the whole thing. When you really dive deep into the leg lock game, you realize that there is so many more avenues to transition from those laces to either an upper body control position or a straight up submission. I can be in the honey hole and then armbar you. I can be in the honey hole and guillotine you. You can have me in the honey hole and I can take your back off of it. I can also tap you with a leg lock. It's a very fluid environment. You think you're in a good spot, but you're really in a bad spot. In my opinion, it's a lot more complicated than the rest of the game because it's a more fluid environment. You're countering. But we don't have to get tunnel vision in that leg lock. We don't have to get tunnel vision on the legs. We can approach it as just another position, which opens us up to a lot more, And like I said before, everything's on the way to the back. I'm trying to heel hook you while thinking, well, when is he going to give me his back? I'm going to give this up and take his back when he defends it.
Right.
And I just think that's so much more prevalent in no gi than it is in the gi. But I think that all changed. For me, that changed when the Danaher guys came on. See, when I started doing leg locks, I had no one to show me leg lock. The only guy that showed me a leg lock was Joey Best back in the day. But, he wasn't super knowledgeable, and I feel like nobody was. But when it was funny, I had my own leg lock game anyway, and it was just incredibly incomplete. I had a lot of flexibility, so I caught people by surprise. But then when I went to ADCC, I met Josh Hayden, and they had a system, like Josh and Joe Bays. They had a leg locking system. It was the first time I saw it as a system, and it revolved around the straight ankle a lot more than I've ever seen. They do everything. They do a straight ankle first, and if the heel hook presents itself, you can switch to a heel hook. I think their game was great, especially for the time. So I learned that system, brought my leg lock game to a different level. And then Gordon Ryan and Gary Tonin came on the scene, and it was like, oh, that's leg locking. So it was a next level. It was a next level. And then we started seeing these guys take the back, take the back, take the back off of everything. They were taking everybody's back. And so it sort of opened up a whole new world of jiu-jitsu, a different way to approach it. My game is completely different. I mean, I do some things that I still do when I was a blue belt and a white belt, but, when it comes to the open guard, my game has changed quite a bit. And I have to give credit to John Danaher and those guys for coming out and showing. I've still never watched one of their DVDs, not because I don't want to support them. I just feel like I can watch them and I know what they're doing. It's eye-opening. When you watch what they're doing, you're like, holy shit, that's what they're doing. Oh my God.
Dude, I can't listen to John Danaher speak for longer than like a minute or two. There's just something about his voice on that microphone that just, it gets inside of my head and kind of makes my eyes roll back. It's a weird, he's a genius, obviously, he has a very intelligent person, and I'm not trying to knock anything other than the fact that his voice just makes my skin crawl.
Yeah. Well, I think that right now they have these DVDs out, or these instructionals that, it's almost like they want to take somebody who's a white belt and turn them directly into a high level black belt.
Right.
I think that it would benefit us if there was an instructional from them that was a little less talking, like,
right.
show me what you're doing. I can see it. I can, it's like when I learn guitar, I come across these videos of people playing guitar and they're like, showing me all the little basics. I'm like, I already know that part. Give me the part I'm really looking at this video for. And then there's other guys I learn guitar from who are just, all right, you're too advanced for me. I don't know what the hell you're doing. I feel like Danaher goes from, basic to like highly advanced. It's almost too much. I think we would need an instructional that was like 5 minutes long.
Right, exactly. I'm going to fast forward through all of this. I get, as much as I enjoy listening to you talk, John, I got things to do. Let's just show me what I need to see, and we can move on. And it's funny. It's funny you say that too, man, because like as we start to become a little bit higher in the world of jiu-jitsu, we've kind of been there and done that. Like you start to kind of see the man behind the curtain. Whereupon, like, because I do this a lot when I teach, I can't help myself. We were laughing about this the other day. When I'm teaching a class, like I like to talk because I just feel important. And and it's amazing to me that people hang off of my every word like I'm some kind of like genius. Because in reality, I'm just showing you a freaking armbar. But as you start to go up a little bit farther in jiu-jitsu, you start to realize, all right, Rob, right? Whereupon I appreciate what you're saying, but like, let's just come on, brother. Let's just move on. I don't really need a life lesson here.
Right. No, I know. You got to find, as an instructor, you really do want to find a happy medium. Yeah. Where you're showing the move, but you're not overly analyzing the principles behind it, because, I usually teach a class. Mostly it's showing you where to move, like here's the information. And then there's a why, then there's always a why. Okay, why am I doing this? Why am I in this position? What am I thinking when I'm approaching it? But it doesn't have to be long and drawn out. You can say the information and people retain it. I think there were instructors, especially back, like Rob. Rob's a great instructor, obviously, but we all know he's long-winded.
Right. I'm not giving Rob shit, but it's just funny giving Rob shit. So he'll probably say the same thing.
But there was, there wasn't a blueprint really. There was no blueprint on how to teach this. And it was so new, especially back then that we had a lot of trial and error, and it has advanced. And I do think the best way to teach it is show where to put my damn hand, show where to put your foot, tell them why. Why we're there, why are we doing that? And, if there's principles, like if there's rules to that position, make them clear. But again, it doesn't have to be long and drawn out, It can be confusing when it's too long and drawn out.
Let me ask you another question. Let's get back to something else we were talking about, because you mentioned about training with Joe Baez and what's his name, Jason Hayden, Josh Hayden, and the idea of everything coming off of the straight ankle lock. And when I think about that, I think about kind of where John Danaher came into play and changed things. When I think about things that come off of the straight ankle lock, I think about more about the Sambo breaking open the closed guard and sitting back quickly into that heel hook, straight ankle position off of that, or some of the catch racing applications. And now we can start to talk about, again, how, because people aren't playing closed guard anymore, you have to attack. And it's the concept of the ashi, which is something that John Danaher brought back to the table, because an ashi is a judo terminology, which means a pin or an entanglement to start to put the body on the ground. Talk about how John Danaher, by impressing the importance of using that entanglement, changed the leg lock game.
Well, I think the way I was learning it, from Josh Hayden, and Joe Baez, it was 50-50 and straight ankle locks. So there was a crossbody straight from 50-50. There's your regular straight where you fall down and put your foot on the hip and drive, right? And then you had your 50-50 heel hooks. And then he had something called 80-20, where basically he did a knee bar from 50-50, but also had the heel hooked. So it looked like a little bit like the honey hole in a way, but it was really a variation of the 50-50. And it was like a straight knee bar, but also you had the heel hooked. So it was pretty devastating. But with the difference between what they were doing and what the Danaher guys were doing is the Danaher guys had very specific laces. Like they went honey hole first. Like honey hole was huge. Going from ashi to the honey hole was a brand new concept. Nobody was doing that. Nobody was wrapping ashi. They peel the foot off, and then you X under the opposite leg and then hoist them back and lock in the honey hole and finish a heel hook. That whole thing was not done by anyone. I used to do a honey hole version where if someone passed my guard while they were standing and trying to go knee on belly, I would just, how I like bring my leg around.
Right.
But I used to just place my foot on the hip and bring my right knee up and heel hook you. I didn't lock it in. Like I didn't know that you can lock like a triangle,
right,
the honey hole. And then the concept of opening your knee to drive your hip and keep them away, it was much more detailed. There was so much more. I mean, the whole concept of the honey hole was new. And then from there, it became, that you build on that. And it went in a totally different direction. Now what's interesting is that 50-50 game is sort of coming back around. People know how to navigate the honey hole now. So you're transitioning back into the 50-50, and now the 50-50 game is exploding in a new direction than I had ever seen. So it just keeps morphing and getting better and better. And not to mention all the avenues to the upper body submissions or back takes. So I think it was still in its infancy with Hayden and Joe Baez. And then all of a sudden you had these guys that looked like they were Marcelo Garcia doing leg locks. And it was like, holy shit. I mean, they changed the whole game.
And when I watch a lot of current, pro jiu-jitsu matches, particularly with some of the other comers, when we were at that Jits King match in Largo, like it really became apparent to me that like the new jiu-jitsu fighter is using all of these things, and it's not something that we can kind of look back on, because we learned things kind of separately at the time. You know what I'm talking about? We were kind of learning on the go, like particularly yourself, like creating things and making things happen. It wasn't really a part of the dogma of jiu-jitsu. But when you see these young guys that are coming up, and I can say that again, even more than just in the idea of leg locking, we talk about points grappling versus submission only grappling. Like these guys are are well versed in all aspects
Right.
of grappling because they're learning the complete package.
Yeah.
And they're starting, not to mention they're starting when they're like, 10, 12 years old now,
Right.
but they're learning to do everything from white
Yeah.
belt to blue belt.
Yeah. And I think the next level of jiu-jitsu is going to be an altered wrestling game. It's going to be right now there's a very distinct difference between what I look like when I'm wrestling and what I look like doing jiu-jitsu. I think we're going to be doing a lot more jiu-jitsu standing, so to speak. Like instead of doubles and singles, we're going to be doing a lot more leg trips, a lot more. I mean, it's so much more advantageous to snap someone's head down and get that front headlock in jiu-jitsu than anything, So I think we're going to see the wrestling game change to meet more jiu-jitsu requirements, and we'll see like a fusion in the wrestling game and the jiu-jitsu. I think there's still missing pieces there that we're going to find and put together. So
that's interesting
the
too.
Next level.
Yeah, because when you think of a lot of competitive jiu-jitsu, particularly American jiu-jitsu competitors in the earlier days, most of them weren't really jiu-jitsu guys. They were wrestling guys that kind of learned how to wrestle and then figured out a way to maybe not beat jiu-jitsu, but like shut down someone's jiu-jitsu well enough to be able to pass the guard and win the positions. And, jiu-jitsu in general in the early days, we were talking about the whole episode was basically that game. It wasn't necessarily about submitting someone. Now, again, you could still submit someone from your guard, but it was more about like shutting down someone's jiu-jitsu in order to win a match or win a competition without allowing them. I think you're right in that regard that like because we're starting to see guys that aren't wrestlers, they understand that wrestling is a part of jiu-jitsu, but they want to be complete grapplers and be able to attack from their feet. We're going to see more of that. That's an interesting point of view.
Yeah, I think that's the next level to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's what a journey though, all around that this has been. Like to come into a sport that's relatively new and be in it and watch it grow to what it's grown. It's really incredible. I feel bad for the guys that don't want to change with the times. The guys that don't want to do leg locks, the guys like why?
There's this crazy you say that because there still are some dudes out there that refuse to acknowledge that.
It's part of the submission game. We're submitting people.
Right.
Like don't sit there and tell me, no, I'm doing this because it has to be old school jiu-jitsu. It has to be what Elio Gracie did.
Right.
Come on. We're doing submission holds. We're making people tap with submission holds.
Right. If that were the case, you look at a guy like, Holes Gracie that people don't talk as much about as the amazing guy he is. The whole reason why the game progressed to where it was, 25 years ago, which is better than what it was 25, is because Holes Gracie, no one wrestled. No one did anything. Holes Gracie went out and worked with Sambo guys. He went out and worked with wrestling guys. He cross-trained, which was so horrible at that point. Guys were like, you can't do that, but he did it anyway. And like, we're starting to see that if you're not growing with the times, man, you're just missing the boat, man.
I feel bad for them because it's fun. I mean, I thought you guys were doing jiu-jitsu because it was fun at first. Like, I thought it was sort of like your violent meditation. Like, why would you not want to explore these other areas that are there? Like, is it not fun? Like, is it not fun for you to do leg locks? Why? Because you suck at it? Get better, bitch. Like it's ridiculous to me.
It's so true, man. Like I had Jim Ayers on the other night and we were talking about that and he just said the same thing. He's like, bro, like I was that same guy. I got my black belt, never did a leg lock once. That was a very true. He trained under Wagner. There was no leg locks. And he said one day he was in there training, he got sick of getting in leg locks and Wagner would put him in leg locks and he would tap and he said, no, man, don't tap. I'm not going to break your leg. I'm going to hold it here. But think about this. Think about what's happening and figure out a way to get out of this thing. And then you'll learn how to freaking how to work it. Man.
Luckily, there are people out there still like changing the game. I mean, I think there's a lot of 10th Planet guys really have some interesting stuff that these guys are putting out. They're a great team as well.
Yeah,
the 10th Planet guys. minus the rubber guard. I was never a fan of the rubber guard. To be honest with you, I think it's a ridiculous position.
I'll tell you, if you sleep on dudes in rubber guard, though, I almost got tapped by one of my purple balls the other day.
I'm not saying
put me in rubber
tap you. It can tap you, but you're in a very unnatural position. I mean,
right.
It's sort of ridiculous. Sort of like, let me take my body and put it in a completely unnatural position and then build a system out of that.
Right.
And meanwhile, there's a really easy way to stop all that bullshit. Just keep your head in the center. Don't ever move your head one side or the other and drive into them. If they do, they are rubber guard. I just feel like it's, and then not to mention the whole concept of like, I already have your hips controlled inside the closed guard. So the moment you open them is when I'm going to pass you. I'm not going to let you grab a stupid crackhead hook on me, whatever they call it.
Right.
I just find it just doesn't seem to go with the same principles behind everything else. And it just has this, it's just weird. And I don't think it's, who's really making it work high level?
No. You're not seeing that stuff. You're not seeing that stuff a lot in MMA and places like that, or really high level competitions. It's just not. And it's funny. It's funny you say that because I know a lot of guys that train at 10th Planet, and it's just there's always a very like. It's just they're different people. It's fun. I get it. And I'm not by no means judging the effectiveness of what they do. I'm not having that conversation. Yeah. It's just a different philosophical approach to the art of jiu-jitsu in the way they train, the way they coach, the way they do everything.
Well, I like Eddie Bravo's stuff. Other than that, I really do. I like his half guard stuff is pretty incredible. I like his half guard. But I think if you look at a guy like, for example, you want to talk about an opposite of a 10th Planet guy, Nicky Rodriguez. Look at the level of athleticism that guy brings to the table. Like he shuts down everyone's guard bullshit, so to speak. Right. Yes. He brings a level of intensity to the sport that, he's using that intensity in a big way. And we're starting to see some lines blur here where, the narrative of you don't have to be strong to win. You kind of do now.
Yeah, you say that. I mean, it's funny you say that because when you talk about, again, when you start seeing any sport go to that next level where they're getting people that are getting views, people are starting to get paid, like it's going to attract next level athletes.
Sure.
And in order to be able to hang on that level, like you can't play in the NFL if you're just a skilled guy. It's the reason why I do the combine. Now there's exceptions to that rule, but you have to be able to run a 40-yard dash in frickin', under 4 seconds, or whatever, maybe not, 4.5 or whatever. You have to be able to do so many reps. You have to be that next level athlete, or you just can't hang.
Could you imagine? Can you imagine take a fucking basketball team and then put them in jiu-jitsu for like 2 years intensely? How sick they would be.
Yeah, right. We're getting to that point. We're getting to that point.
I think we are, but we're not there yet.
Not there yet, but it's coming. It's coming.
But it's coming, for sure. But hey, dude, my computer is about to go dead.
I was just gonna call it. So let's run it here, man. Robbie, thank you so much for your time, brother. Happy birthday, man. It's been a great conversation, man. Again, you're awesome, and like as much as I love you and joke with you, you really have an amazing jiu-jitsu mind, man. And anytime I get an opportunity to listen to you talk, I really appreciate it, brother.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Good luck to you, man. Thanks for coming on. Just for you guys, this is AC Jiu-Jitsu Club finishing up here. Had Robbie Donofrio on. It's his birthday. Go check him out. Anything you want to plug real quick before we go?
No, just my website, graciebrandon.com. Check us out. Come in, visit us. If you're a jiu-jitsu guy, we welcome everybody.
Awesome, man. Robbie, thank you so much for your time, brother. Take it easy.
Thanks.
Yeah. Bye.